All right, welcome everybody to the NABJ Sports Task Force for our webinar today, and that's the front and center values of behind the scenes voices, where we're talking about the folks behind the scenes who help with the decision making, what goes on, what doesn't, and as we know, there's not a lot of folks who look like us necessarily in those positions, but we're going to talk about that. And let's introduce our panel. We're going to go from the Brady Bunch top left, at least on my screen. And we'll go with Thomas Warren, the senior assignment editor at the NFL Network and a fellow Howardite. Thomas, unmute, looks like.
You know.
There you go. All right, Jasmine Ellis, the coordinating producer at Ride On Projects. I'm sorry about that. Yes, Ride On Projects. Jasmine, I'm sorry about that. Sorry for the butchering job out of the gate. All right, we have
gear. It's cool.
Sorry about that. Jean A. Jackson, producer at WDSU TV. Shanika Dabney Henderson, the VP of production for the Saints and Pelicans. And Anthony Smith, who is a producer director for the NFL Network. There's a lot of very huge, important projects for us at the network.
Senior producer, Steve. Senior producer.
Senior producer. Sorry about that. But Shanika, I want to start with you, since you work for the Pels, the Saints, but you worked for the NFL before too, and we know what's going on in the world is not a stick-to-sports moment right now. We're all home from COVID. We see a lot of athletes involved in the protest and speaking out. And what about kind of monitoring the crossover that we're having with sports and society? And a lot of our media entities saying, go for it. We're not just sticking to sports.
That has been the communication in my organization. And I think the organization would acknowledge that this is sort of, in a lot of ways, a new space for them, right? To be leaning into talking about the issues that are impacting us, that sports is traditionally the distraction, right? What people turn to because they don't want to think about the stuff that's going on. But the reality of it is look, I'm a sports fan and I love my football Sundays and all that stuff, but I'm also impacted personally by the things that, that people are out here protesting about. I can't shut that off. I can't turn off the social justice issues that have kind of come to the forefront now. So I think it's great that sports organizations are realizing that this is something that they need to lean into. Look at the demographics of basketball teams, of football teams. These are the issues that are impacting the players. These are the issues that are impacting a large chunk of the fan bases. So sports has such a power, right? And these athletes have a platform. These teams have a platform. And so I think what we would hope is that now that a lot of these sports teams and companies are willing to take on this challenge, that it's going to elevate this conversation and it's not going to just fizzle out the way we've seen in the past. We've seen these movements kind of crop up before and then they fall by the wayside. I think now that you have the power of professional teams, of Roger Goodell coming out and saying Black Lives Matter, that it's not just Black people saying it, that it's not just Black athletes saying it, that it can finally resonate on a level where we actually see some change happening. I think it's long overdue, if you ask me.
I think
but go ahead, Thomas.
If I can jump in real quick, I think to further Shanika's point that at least in the NFL, I think largely because it's player driven. I mean, we saw the video that the players put out about a week and a half ago, calling on the league to call out systemic racism, to ask the league to call out that Black Lives Matter. And you've seen a lot more high-profile athletes speaking up, guys who hadn't done it before, guys like Dak Prescott, like Russell Wilson, like Odell Beckham Jr. But more than that, you see now prominent white players, and particularly white quarterbacks speak up. Guys like Tom Brady, like Carson Wentz. And to me, it spoke volumes that somebody like Joe Burrow, the #1 overall pick, hasn't even played a game in the NFL yet. And he stepped out and is now using his platform on social media to call out some of these injustices, which I don't know if we've seen that before. And then you have a guy like Trevor Lawrence at the University of Clemson, projected possibly #1 pick next year. He's using his platform to speak out on it. So I think again, largely it's been player driven, and guys, I think, finally understanding the power that they have. And like Shanika said, they have their own platforms through social media that they can get their voices out there on their own. And it's actually really refreshing to see guys not being afraid to do that, where before, because of how big brands, personal brands can be, they may not have done it before. But the fact that guys are willing to do that now, I think speaks volumes. And when they speak, you have to listen now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, and Thomas hit the nail on the head. I think that in many ways, as Black creatives, as Black people that are in this industry, this is a moment that a lot of us have been waiting for basically our entire careers. And I think it's incumbent upon us to seize this moment. But also, look, there's a lot of people right now that this has become the cause of the moment. And they are speaking up in ways that people haven't spoken up before. I think that it's incumbent upon us also to keep people's feet to the fire and to make sure that a lot of the promises that are being made, a lot of the things that are being said right now, that people follow through on these statements, on the things that they're promising and that they're saying.
Johnny, media-wise, Johnny, I want to start with you. Media-wise, 4 years ago, we were going through the same thing. We saw Alton Sterling get killed in Baton Rouge on video. We saw a lot of people, Black unarmed men, Eric Garner, get killed on video, right? But we were not amid COVID, okay? We had other things to kind of take our mind off of that. It seems like media companies now are not worried so much about what sponsors are going to say if they have discussions like this. What about that evolution from even 4 years ago to now?
I think, and I hate to make comparisons between COVID and what's going on with race relations right now, but when COVID started and it was kind of at that height, we kept hearing that it was Black people that were dying. So we heard this rallying cry of, Black Lives Matter, even with COVID. So I think the anxiety with that and the sadness with that, and then a few weeks later, we see this man, George Floyd, with an officer kneeling on his neck. And I think that got us to a boiling point where we were just like, y'all don't care if we die from a virus or if we die from the police, and we are tired. So I think that is basically, I don't want to say COVID was the catalyst, but I think we reached a point where we were absolutely fed up. It's either you're going to die from COVID or the police. That's how we felt.
But Jasmine, this also, George Floyd was the third strike, right? Because we had Ahmaud Arbery, we had Breonna Taylor, and then we had George Floyd, and the video was so raw and so painful, with the smugness on the face of the police officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck. And sitting from your chair, in what you do. I mean, what was the kind of the directive of, we can't let this go, we've got to continue to push this and see where this goes, and your voice in saying, this is the why. So when people are protesting and you see looters and stuff like that, it's not the what is going on, but this is the why this is going. How important was it for you to continue to push that element of things?
I think I work on a team that understood the why. It was now I had to force the conversation of who is going to be talking about this on, our shows, on our network, and asking people to really challenge themselves and acknowledge that Black voices are necessary to engage this conversation on every show, on every topic. When it comes to talking about Black Lives Matter, who are the Black voices in the room? And it shouldn't just be one, because, we're not all the same. We all have different perspectives, and we're all going to respond to, how Drew Brees handled everything differently, it's.
Okay. Is everyone still have me? Looks like we lost Jasmine for a second.
Oh.
Okay, you're back. I got you back. Okay.
Yeah, that was the question that I asked and continue to raise, is who are the people that are going to drive the conversation about the why now, and making sure that Black voices are part of that conversation. I think that's something that we, as people behind the scenes, all feel that weight even more right now.
And what was the response when you were saying, hey, we need to have this person or that person? Was it welcoming?
It wasn't even this. I didn't even raise people, because I also said, this is not my job, just my job. This is every producer's job, whether you're Black or you're white. You should be asking yourself and your show staff, where are the Black people? And the response was great. People received the message, and they then had to do the work of finding Black people, because I also said, this is not just my job. You know, I've been going to NABJ for 10 years, over 10 years. I've been suggesting Black voices for shows since I've been going to NABJ. So, you know, review the notes that I've been giving you and start to do the work of actually adding the voices that we need right now.
Thomas, I want you to chime in on that, because the NFL Network, we are owned by the first three letters. And you have seen that we have been doing nonstop roundtables filled with Black people, having very Black discussions. And that is the first. I've been there for 12 years. That is a first that they've been willing to go out on this limb.
Well, I think I think it's understanding, as Jasmine said, understanding the moment and seeing just the necessity in having Black voices involved in this conversation. But I think what I've noticed differently about this time is that those of us behind the scenes have now been approached about, well, what kind of voices do we need to have? Who are the right ones? And to Jasmine's point, it's a double-edged sword, because on one end, it's not really our job to find that, but we also know part of it is it's our job to find it. So, but it's good that we've actually been included in the conversations. You don't want it to be for these reasons, but we've been involved in the conversations in some of the meetings, and actually trying to get, you know, those above us in senior positions to understand kind of just what the moment is. And again, speaking more to the why and not getting distracted by the what, as you mentioned, Steve. And I think that's what a lot of people do. They get distracted by seeing the looting, is that becomes the focus in the narrative. And it's reminding people that there is a reason we got here. A man's died from having a police officer's knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So let's not distract from that. Breonna Taylor was sleeping in her bed when the police battered in her house and shot her 8 times. So let's not get off the narrative or the point of why we're in this situation. So I think it's been imperative on us to, in the meetings that we have, having that in our minds, to then say, okay, let's not get off topic, and let's get the right voices who can speak to the substance of what we're talking about, and not necessarily what's sexy and what's getting all the attention.
But can we just backtrack real quick? Because at the end of the day, if there aren't enough Black people who are decision makers, right? It doesn't matter. Like, I can be in the room, Jasmine can be in the room, Tom. I've been in the room. You know, I've had these difficult conversations about how are we going to cover Colin Kaepernick. But if the folks who are ultimately making the decisions, if there are no people with diverse perspectives who are in the true positions of, like, we are ultimately deciding as a network how we're going to cover this story, if there's no diversity on that level, we can talk and talk and talk all we want, right? You need people who are in decision-making positions and who are Black, you know, who bring diversity to the table. And I'll never forget, there was a meeting that was related to, you know, social justice and how we were going to cover something. And as much as I enjoyed my time at NFL Network, I was the first Black female coordinating producer there, but I was really disappointed that meeting took place and there was not one Black person in the meeting. I wasn't in the meeting. You know, I was invited to share my perspective. Now, I don't speak for all Black people, but I also don't know how you can have a conversation about an issue that is so deeply personal to Black folks and not have one Black voice in the room. And I think that's the problem, is that, you know, it's great that, you know, all of us have been able to have positions and, you know, management positions on some level. But if you're not the manager, if you're not one of the managers, then you're a voice, but, you know, is your voice actually even being heard at the table? And that's kind of what I think we need to keep pushing that. And I know that was an initiative that we had when I was at NFL Network. We were really vocal about the fact that we needed more in the leadership ranks. You needed more executives. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's funny. Me and Thomas have had a lot of conversations about this in the last few weeks. And one of the things that we've said, Black Lives Matter. People are putting up signs and people are painting murals with Black Lives Matter. But I think that people also need to understand what's getting lost in translation is that Black people matter, Black voices matter, Black leaders matter, Black executives matter, Black storytellers matter. And I think that, at times it's easy to put up these symbolic signs and there's been a lot of symbolism that's been happening these last couple of weeks. I mean, we were talking about Juneteenth, last week. And while I'm in full support of having Juneteenth as a national holiday, that's something that should have happened a long time ago. It's like, don't ask me to pat you on the back for giving me something that I should have had a long time ago. And there's a lot of symbolism that's going on right now. And I think that we have to be careful and we have to keep an eye on that and make sure that there's actual tangible, actionable items that come out of this moment. Because if it's a lot of speeches, if it's a lot of signs, if it's a lot of symbolism, then I think that this opportunity that we have right now is going to be lost.
I agree with that. I actually had a conversation with a couple of my friends the other day on Juneteenth, and we were worried, we were concerned that, for lack of a better word, is Juneteenth going to become gentrified? Is it going to be a thing where we see Juneteenth shirts being sold in Target, kind of like around Cinco de Mayo, we see, all this Hispanic culture everywhere. Next year, are we going to see this whole blackout theme around Juneteenth, and now it's going to be a moneymaker and people forget, the true meaning of it? So that is my concern too.
To the issue of what Shanika was talking about, Black decision makers in the room. We know that is not the case at the NFL Network. And Jasmine and Jean, I really would like for you to chime in on this because it's an interesting conversation that Anthony and I have had, because now we're all of a sudden really the sounding boards at our place. I mean, people are coming, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I'm not a decision maker. Okay, I'm just giving an opinion. And I want to start with you, Jean, about people, decision making, the people at the top, people saying, we are going to cover this in this type of way, or we need to have, as Jasmine said, this type of voice doing this. In this climate, it seems convenient, but also in this climate, there is COVID. There are no promotions at most workplaces. A lot of places are cutting jobs right now. Okay, so how are we now going to get these people in decision-making positions? Or do we just kind of take it being the psychological couch for our white colleagues right now and say, we've got the answers from this perspective, but don't forget us when the elevator goes up a floor? I mean, we're in a very odd time. We're saying we need more decision makers. We've been saying this for decades.
Right. Well, fortunately, I work at a station where my news director is a Black woman and our general manager is a Black man. With that being said, I do think that we have a voice, but we also have to remember that, some of us work for certain companies and we have to ultimately, whatever decisions that they make as far as story content, that goes. And sometimes things have to be kicked up higher than our news director or our GM, and it has to go to, New York. But, and I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Well, I'm going to kind of follow up something you just said. When you have to kick stories up to New York or whatever, what is that process? And what about, because we know at the NFL, sometimes stories get kicked. Colin Kaepernick, I was the first person who noticed Colin Kaepernick not standing for the national anthem. That story got kicked up to New York before it saw the light of day.
Right.
So
I think when the story is, for example, with Alton Sterling and, certain parts of the video, should you show it completely because you need to really drive home that point, or should you just tell the story and not show the video? But I think it's a little bit different for me because we do have Black management inside my newsroom. So I do know that there are some stories that in the past, where the legal issues or not, we can't do them. But I can't ultimately say that, you know, my direct boss is not a Black person. Now, their direct boss may not be a Black person, but it's kind of hard for me to answer that question because I don't
Right.
see that, because my daily interaction is with Black people in leadership.
Think along the lines just of your question about leadership roles and promotion. For me, I now have the mindset that I will no longer accept like leadership positions or promotions where there are no other Black people in leadership positions, where I don't have, you know, other management above me of color. Like I am now thinking about the types of spaces I want to work in moving forward. Not necessarily like in this moment, you know, as companies scramble to find Black leaders, and if they scramble my way, like these are the requirements that I will have for myself to work in their culture, to know that this is not just, you know, a moment, that they're developing pipelines for younger producers and behind the scenes people to grow within that company. Like I'm more thinking big picture about like the structural changes that I want to see at these media companies. And I think like we all have that power now moving forward to demand this of the places that, you know, are now viewing a lot of us as a hot commodity, to say like, this position is interesting to me, but what is the pipeline for growth for me and the people who will be below me who are Black? And yeah.
I mean, what we're talking about, if I can jump in, Steve, we're talking about decisiveness, because going back to what Anthony talked about earlier and Shanika's, a lot of these symbols that have been made, symbolic gestures being made, like making Juneteenth a company holiday, or companies changing their symbols to support Black Lives Matter, or companies pulling episodes that have characters in blackface. Those are decisions that came from the very top, where they seemingly happened very quickly, and it was somebody or somebodies in these senior executive positions who said, this isn't good, we're going to make the decision to pull this stuff or to make these decisions. Those are great, but I'm interested to see what happens, because a lot of times, as everyone's been saying, when I say when the block is hot and the attention is there, everyone wants to jump in because they don't want to be seen as being on the wrong side of history. But I'm interested to see what happens in the weeks and the months after the protests start to wane, the news cycle goes on to the next news story. It's a matter of the same people who are in these top level positions who made the seemingly quick decisions to get these symbolic gestures done. Okay, now when we're talking about more concrete, tangible changes, like the hiring, like the promotion, like the retention of Black employees, and then creating, like Jasmine said, the pipeline to get them into senior executive leadership, is there still going to be that sense of urgency to make that happen? And that's when we're actually seeing some change, when the decision makers can be that decisive, because that's really what we're talking about. Are they going to be about it rather than just talk about it?
You know, one other thing with that too, Thomas, I want to jump in. These symbolic gestures also, they're easy. Hiring Black executives, that's hard. That's the hard work. And we've been doing the hard work all our careers. It's like we cannot be pacified by these symbolic gestures, because again, that's easy. If we bring in a couple interns, you know, in the fall, and we say that we're bringing in Black talent, again, that's easy. We have to make people do the hard work, and we have to hold people accountable to do the hard work. Because while these symbolic gestures are great, it's symbolism. That's not putting food on the table, and that's not putting us in a position where we have more executives, to Shanika's point, that are in rooms and that are making decisions that affect everybody, Black, white, and otherwise.
Jasmine, you said something that was absolutely profound to me, and honestly, I don't know if I would have the stones to do it, and that is leveraging your worth to demand. If you're going to promote me, I want X, Y, and Z, including a pipeline, or I need another person who looks like me, you know, within the next 6 months to do something like me. Do you think, because I mean, there's a lot of us not brave enough to do that. A lot of us would be like, hey, look, I'm going to take the job and I'll try to pull some people up. I mean, what about the courage or your decision to go ahead and say, I'm not going to sing the song solo?
I'm at the point where I'm exhausted, and it's truly about my own survival in this industry. Like, if I'm going to thrive in sports media, this is what it's going to require for me to join, whatever company. And if I don't, step up to the plate knowing my power, when will they ever acknowledge it? And right now we have Black power. Like these media companies are acknowledging that, the power of our Blackness. And so if I'm not trying to leverage it, I'm just going to continue in this cycle of just being exhausted, being the only one fighting for these things. And I don't want to do it anymore. I know I come from a place of privilege at the point I am in my career to be able to say that. And it's brave, but it's also just a survival tactic at this point moving forward, that if I'm going to continue to do this, like, we know America is not going to get better overnight, and we're going to be having these conversations, for many years to come. So, this is the real structural change that I need to see, to know that a company is really investing in me.
Dabs, what if that person says that's a deal breaker? Then I can only hire one. I can only promote one.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Look, I think that what Jasmine is talking about is it's crucial and it's critical. And I think that there's multiple avenues to that, right? So I think that her approach is a way to do it. And I look at, since I've been hired in the position that I've been in, I didn't make that demand, but I certainly noticed that there was a need for more diverse voices where we are. And in the position that I'm in, I'm able to contribute to diversifying our staff. There are qualified Black people in production everywhere. And I've been in NABJ for 20 years now. So I know that they exist and I've met them. And so, for me, it is, I have this position and I'm going to make sure, even if there isn't anybody, anybody else who's actively working toward that goal, that it's going to be my goal to make sure that I'm looking for those people. Maybe I'll find them, maybe I won't. And I have found some, I have found some since I've been in the position that I've been in, of really qualified candidates. And I think that's really been what part of the problem is that there's been such a lazy approach to hiring, right? It's hiring who was already in your network. Well, if your network isn't diverse, how are you going to find me? And so I think for me, it's been taking that, really doing the work, like putting in the work, because I understand the value of diversity. I understand that diversity truly, it makes us better. Having I don't want to just be the one Black person speaking for all Black people. I don't think that does anything for anybody, because I can't speak for all Black people. I think that it's really important to have a team that looks more like the makeup of the country, or looks more like the makeup of, the sports that we're covering, or whatever the case may be. And then just in addition to that, kind of going back to a point that was made earlier, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I've certainly been getting hit up by folks saying, like, how can I support this movement? How can I be an ally in this movement? And being an ally is, okay, so let's say it is just me in the room. Don't let me just be speaking by myself if you agree with me. Don't make me the only person who is just speaking on behalf of something. Support me, join me, be the person to speak first. And I feel like while there are some people who are really genuine and who are coming from a genuine and authentic place of, like, wanting to support, don't leave me out on a limb doing it and then you give me a pat on the back after the meeting, like, you made some good points in that meeting. No, you speak up in that meeting with me, or speak up before me. Like, because it's going to have a different weight if it's coming from not a Black person at the end of the day.
Shanika, that's happened before to you? You mean that happens? I'll also say this, going one step further. If you were in a room, me and Thomas talked about this last week. If you're in a room and you don't see any Black people in the room, you don't see any women in the room, or any other minorities in the room, speak up. And then, taking it one step further, do something about it, or use whatever power that you have in your position to do something about that, to advocate for people to be in that room that you're in. If they have the title, if they don't have the title. One of my mentors, who's actually, I know, Steve, you want to talk about Black managers, and if you've ever had managers that were Black, one of my mentors and advocates used to bring me into rooms, and he's African American, he used to bring me into rooms and rooms that in reality I had no business being in. But he would bring me into the room, and I would see how meetings at an executive level were conducted. Just because you don't have the title doesn't mean that you can't be in a room, and that doesn't mean that you can't advocate for people to be in that room. And I think that that's something that gets lost as well. Where people will ask, well, what can I do? I mean, there's a bunch that you can do. There's a bunch, but I mean, it's funny. And Jasmine spoke about this earlier in regards to, is it our job? No, but it kind of is our job. And being tired but still fighting the good fight. In many ways, do we want to be in every single meeting if we are one or two or three Black producers at a company? No, but we know that to get the next person in the room that we have to do that. And I think that being in the room, I mean, it's so important. And it's not just being in the room when we're talking about Black issues. It's not just being invited to the grown-up table on Thanksgiving. It's being invited there every single day of the year. So we can provide our perspectives on things that have absolutely nothing to do with Black issues. But just because we have a perspective that's different than the majority of the makeup of the executives of many of our companies.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jasmine.
Just quickly to add, also invite yourself in the room. When I was at ESPN, there was this weekly meeting I always walk past, all white people, all people I recognize as being in management and in charge of important things. And I just asked, can I start coming to this meeting? And so just advice for everyone watching, I know now we're all on Zoom and everything, but just try to keep your ear to the streets or emails and invite yourself to things that you're not already being invited to.
Absolutely. There's a way to do it respectively and without being abrasive. But I mean, you're absolutely right, Jasmine. Absolutely.
And then Steve, I can jump in too, just to kind of further your point about what Jasmine said about leveraging your worth to bring other people up with you. I think it's important to note that this is a Black woman who said this, working in sports media. Because when we talk about sports, and I automatically we go, well, this is a man subject, this is men, and not take into account the space that is needed for women, and especially Black women. Because if we're really being honest, when we're talking about the totem pole of priorities and who's getting the jobs and who we're thinking about, Black women are probably on the bottom of that totem pole. And it shouldn't be that way, especially when we're talking about what we're talking about now. And we've done a ton of roundtables, and other networks and companies have done roundtables. And you see it then primarily men, not understanding that Black women's voices are just as important as ours in these conversations, because the Black men that we are, we're their sons, their fathers, their grandfathers, their uncles, their brothers, their cousins. So I would implore other folks who are if anyone's on here that are in decision-making positions, to understand that their voices are important and need to be amplified. If we're really talking about opening up the space for everybody to be heard, it's paramount that Black women are included in this, because we don't see them represented as much as they need to be. And we have three just right here whose voices need to be heard.
And thank you. Just a great point, Thomas. I think that's so important to be said. And we as men have got to really do what we can to understand that and to push that envelope. Anybody on here can raise your hand, but have you guys gotten more calls from our white colleagues, whatever, in the past 2 weeks? What can I do? Or how can I be a better friend? I mean, show of hands. Okay, I just wanted to say this because I just read Just Mercy and The Sun Does Shine, Just Mercy by Brian Stevens and The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton, who said, these prison guards never were nicer to me or asked more about how I felt until it was my time to come into the chair. That whole week, I was getting a whole lot of phone calls, people asking how I'm doing. And I think that's where we are as Black people in our industries right now. We've got a really good question from Katrina Thomas, who asked, how many of you guys are positioning yourselves to be decision makers? Does anybody want to start with that? Because I think that's a really fair question. Jeanne?
So, I'm not as high on the totem pole as some of y'all. I produce a newscast every day, but I am in charge of that 30 minutes that is on the TV in New Orleans and seen by, 200,000 plus people every day. And, sometimes I look at stories that reporters do and I'll go back and I'll be like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do it like this. Maybe we should word it differently, stuff like that. And most of the times my colleagues who are not Black, who are doing stories on Black people, are very appreciative of, me taking the time out to tell them, hey, let's, rework this. This is how we should tell this story, and making those decisions in the newscast. So yeah, to answer your question.
And Shanika, how do you go about that though? I mean, what is the process of, okay, hey, I'm putting myself on that track to be a decision maker to get into that room?
So, I'm grateful to be, in most of the rooms, at least, now in the position that I'm in. For me, it's using my voice appropriately when I'm in the room. That's what my challenge is right now. I've finally made it, to being able to have these conversations now. How do I use my voice now that I'm there? And what are the best ways to advocate for folks? And what are the best ways to, amplify the voices of, other people who aren't able to come to some of these meetings and be involved in some of the decision-making process. What I'll say is I've been grateful that, since I've been, particularly, I'll talk about this most recent stretch. We put out a video about 2 weeks ago. Black Lives Matter was the message of the video. It showed victims of police brutality. It showed Ahmaud Arbery. It showed protest images. And we knew that wasn't going to go over well with a lot of our fans. We might be in New Orleans as a team, but we're in Louisiana, we're in the South. And we knew that wasn't going to sit well with everybody. But it was something that we wanted to do. It was something that we felt like, look, it's one thing to put up a hashtag one day. It's another thing to just say it with your chest out, right? So to be able to make that decision and then to have the support of, the senior leadership team for us to do that, I think for one, that shows that, they're evolving in their thought processes of things. And it also shows a trust in what our production team was trying to do, and a trust that, listen, if we're going to do this, we have to be authentic about it. And that's truly how I feel. I mean, for me, putting out that video was the rubber stamp on what we've been saying we support. This is the rubber stamp of like, we're actually a part of this. We're actually saying it. We know it's going to make people uncomfortable, and we quite honestly don't care. So that was a gratifying moment of when you realize that, you're not just in the room, but you're actually able to have impact, and you're actually able to kind of move the needle a little bit further. And I think getting there is really just not being afraid to do some of the stuff like that everyone on this call has talked about, that Jasmine has talked about, is no matter what level of voice that you have, use it. I've never been afraid, no matter what level I was at, associate producer, line producer, senior producer, I've never been afraid to speak my mind. Not everybody may have listened, but you better believe you're going to hear how I feel about it. And that's kind of the way I feel like, look, you may not always move the needle, but you definitely, if you have any position behind the scenes, use your voice. Otherwise, why are you there? If you're going to be afraid to speak up, if you're going to be afraid to make people uncomfortable, then why are you even there? You're not doing anything to diversify thought, because you're just saying what everybody else is saying.
Yeah, I want to come to you because Shanika's talking about doing that in a public forum, but in-house, right? So we want to be decision makers. We want to get on that management track. We want to do X, Y, and Z. But suppose that's not you. Suppose you're somewhat of a wallflower, right? You're talented, this and that, but you don't have the courage to invite yourself into that meeting room. Is that a deal breaker? I mean, do you have to have a certain type of gumption to work your way up the food chain, hoping that somebody recognizes your talent?
No, I don't think you have to. And I think the point that I was inviting myself into the room, I was already building one-on-one relationships. And I was able to then send that email to someone who I had already built a relationship with, and knew when he got this email, it would make him go, she should probably be in that room. So I think if you are, a little bit on the shy side, just work on one-on-one. I had a mentor just tell me, make lunch appointments with each manager and you could spread it out. You could do one every other week, once a month, whatever pace is comfortable for you, to get more people who already have seats at the table, knowing your name, to think of you, to bring you up when there's an opportunity. But I do think as you start to get invited into meetings, that will help you build your confidence. And there is a point where you do have to get a little bit more aggressive and comfortable, starting conversations and inviting yourself into rooms and making demands and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's no matter what race, gender you are, you're your best advocate. You're your best PR person. If you're not going to ask for what you want, then you can't bank on somebody else just giving it to you. You have to be comfortable asking for what you want and knowing what you want. I think that oftentimes, it's interesting, like we're in this position now and people are asking us, well, what do you want? And I think that, a lot of people on this call, for the people that I've known for a while and the people that I just met, I can tell that we know what we want. So when somebody asks that question, we have the answer ready to go. I mean, me and Thomas were on a call 2.5 weeks ago, and basically the GM of our company asked, well, Anthony, what do you want to do? I'm putting you on the spot, but what do you want to do? And I told him exactly what I wanted to do and what was next for my career. And I think that the people watching know what you want and know what you want out of your career, because you never know when a moment like this presents itself where people will ask you, well, what do you want to do now? Well, what do you want? And I think that's very important. Yes, that's all I want to say about that.
Thomas, what about that? Because we've had conversations like this. Okay, right? So you're calling for the shot, right? You're open at the elbow, and you finally get the pass, and then you dish it instead of shooting the ball. What about being prepared? Because right now there's a whole lot of us saying, we need more black decision makers. We need to be in the room. And boom, okay, come on in the room. And all of a sudden you're butt naked with nothing nothing ready to fire. I mean, how important is it if we're going to do all this that you better, as Anthony just said, be ready to rock and roll?
I mean, we know there's no secret. You have to be twice as good. We've always heard that, but it's just, that's preparation, right? That's understanding that you can't be afraid of success, right? You have to prepare for it. And so it's no different than any other profession. I'm a Kobe fan, so I'm not passing anything. I'm going to be ready to go. I mean, it's
shoot your shot, buddy.
It's preparation, and it's being prepared for the moment. And I think it's really just not being afraid of success. I think that may be something people don't think about, but it is a thing. And if you're not prepared for it, then, you have no one to blame but yourself. I'm a firm believer of forcing people to recognize your talent, because you may not be the chosen one. Not everybody's LeBron, but if you have talent, sometimes you have to just let people know that you have talent. I've had to do that throughout my career, and it's worked out pretty well. But that's really what it is. It's taking, as Anthony said, ownership of what it is that you want, being ready for it, and you just can't let the moment pass. You have to be prepared. But that's not hard if you really want it.
Shanika, we're seeing a lot of young people, and I say young, maybe a year or two out of college, right? Saying, I'm ready for this job. Why isn't this me? This and that. And they're really pushing to get into certain positions, thinking that they've arrived and whatnot. What kind of path would you tell them to be on? Because we know there are some young superstars, but we also know on certain platforms, like we at the NFL Network, which is a big network, if you slip, if you don't knock it out of the park every time, then that failure is going to be on bigger display. Is it the same old thing? Hey, pay your dues, go to this market and that market, or is it now ride this momentum and push and really get into that spot while the possibility's there?
I can only speak for the path that I took, and I took the pay your dues path, right? And there was benefit in that for me, because I felt like you're going to make mistakes when you're young in your career. And do I want to make those mistakes on a big scale and the fall feels even steeper? Or do I want to make mistakes where people are going to be more forgiving? They're going to understand, like, yeah, okay, you're an associate producer, you're a production assistant. Like, of course you're going to make these kinds of mistakes. And then I learn from them. So I've met, I meet and talk to people who are interns or, want to be interns all the time. And I don't think that, I think sometimes folks are just in a rush to get to where you want to go. I have found in my path that there was so much value. Every step that I made on my way up, there was value in each of those positions, in the people, the things I learned to do, the things I learned not to do, the great managers I was exposed to, the awful managers that I was exposed to. So I found a lot of value in the paying your dues. Now, look, if somebody's willing to offer you an opportunity, I can't say turn it down, but I will say that there is a great deal of value in just putting in the work and being exposed to different things and moving around to different companies. It's like, do you want to fall on your face in a room full of 5 people or a room full of 1 million people? And that's kind of what, when you're looking at a big market or a little market, what I feel like sometimes you're faced with. I have some horror stories from my first job in New Orleans when I was working as an associate producer. And, I'm so thankful that I didn't go from college to working for The View and make that mistake in The View. And it ruined my career because my name got out around circles in New York that she's trash. I was able to make those mistakes in a forgiving environment where people are understood, like you're working your way up. We get it. You're an associate producer, whatever. And then just keep kind of growing from there. So, just based on my experience alone, I would say that it's good to kind of take those steps, and you don't have to take as many steps maybe as I did, but certainly there's no shame in taking those steps and like learning along the way.
Johnny and Jasmine, since you guys are kind of in the daily, grind and this, with everything that's gone on with Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and on the daily, we talk about having that Black decision-making voice as to what content goes on the air or how the wording of a report is. Has anything come across these past few weeks where you had to be like, this really isn't the appropriate way we want to report this story, or at least this video element doesn't necessarily fit the report?
So I actually have a perfect example of this right now. I don't know if any of you have heard the case of this gentleman. I forgot his last name. His name is Modesto, and he was shot and killed by Jefferson Parish sheriff's deputies on the West Bank of the city of New Orleans a few weeks ago. And the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office, they do not have body cameras. So there was video captured of the shooting because one of the officers took out his taser. When he pulled the trigger of his taser, the camera went off and he could see that video. And once that video started rolling, then the shooting happened. Well, the video is very graphic. I have not seen it myself. I know a few members of our management team have seen it, and they have chosen not to show it on air. But the video was given to the media, but it has not been given to the public yet. So I remember writing a script about it saying WDSU has seen the video and this is what happened, has seen the video, and Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office says they're not going to release it to the public. That's what I wrote. We had an anchor who, when reading it on the air, said, WDSU has seen the video and it shows the suspect pointing a gun at an officer. And I said to myself, I was like, I cannot go on the TV. I cannot say it shows this when we're not backing it up with video. So I had a big time issue with that because first of all, we know Black people's relationship with the police is not the greatest right now. And why should they believe what we're saying if we don't have video to back it up? So that was just an example that we had a few weeks ago where, we're describing an incident, but we don't have video to back it up. So I think the wording of how we tell that story until that video is released, and if it is released, is very complicated. And we go back and forth sometimes with how we present that story.
Wow. Did he go rogue, or was that a pre-show decision?
We did not have that discussion. I produced from home that day, so there was another producer at the station who was boothing the show. So I'm just watching it on the TV, and I just see him say it, and I'm like, I run back to my computer to make sure I didn't write that, check the prior versions of the scripts in ENPS, and I didn't write that at all. So I was a bit mortified that this was said on the TV, but it's something that, we've had several discussions among each other, how we should word this. But I'm from the school that if I can't show the viewer what's going on, I'm not going to sit up here and say this video shows this. So that was an issue that we had a few weeks ago.
Anthony, what is NFL Network? Because you've been the biggest advocate for Black History Month packages, things you do with Black college, players from historically Black colleges, a lot of issues of diversity. And when people come to you by saying, hey, let's rerun this A Football Life with Jim Brown, and you say, well, hey, I'm working on a package with something, why can't this run this week of Black History Month? I mean, what about the way you've had to really fight and finesse, I'll say, your ways of getting content that highlight, diversity issues and diversity content on our air?
Well, look, I think that, one thing that I've learned over the years in my 15 years with the NFL is that there's a way to apply pressure, to do it respectfully, to do it tactfully, but to apply pressure. These last, few years, I can't remember the last piece that I wanted to do that I haven't been able to do. And I think that does also go, and it speaks to, obviously we want to be in more of these rooms, but just the leadership that I've had and just the managers that I've had in original content at the NFL, I've been able to have this voice and have the opportunity to tell the stories that I've been able to tell over the last few years. But I also think that goes back to, we mentioned Black managers and having Black people in positions of power that are mentors, that are advocates, but also run departments. So to give you an example, so the former head of my department, Brian Lockhart, who's now at ESPN Plus, he ran our department, and just kind of learning under him, I was able to get my feet wet and start telling some of these stories. The person that replaced Brian is not African-American, but Brian was his manager. And I believe that's the first African-American manager that he had had. But working under him, seeing the way that Brian thought, but also having his eyes open to a different worldview, also has influenced and had a direct impact on the way that he runs our department. So again, pre any of these recent killings, Steve, I did a documentary on Fritz Pollard that aired in February that we just did a screening with the NAACP. I did a piece last year with Deshaun Jackson on his relationship with Nipsey Hussle that had nothing but African Americans in it. And we are on Crenshaw, we have former gang members, and that might have been the blackest thing that I've ever seen on the NFL Network. And somebody actually asked me, like, how did you get the NFL to do a piece where you have former gang members and it's Deshaun and it's Nipsey and it's this, that, and the other? But that's also because of the fact that, one, it's just learning how to apply pressure on stories that are important to me, and building up that currency where, as a storyteller, where there is a trust that if I'm going to tell a story, that I'm going to do it well and respectfully. But I think to answer, going back to your original question, Steve, I think it's just building up a relationship, no matter where you are, no matter who you're working with. It's earning trust, and if you earn trust, no matter what your vocation is, I think that you will be able to do certain things, and you'll be able to do things that are important to you if the people that you work with trust you and trust that you will be able to do a good job.
This is a great question from Kylan Watson. Thomas, I'm going to start with you. I want everyone to answer. So Thomas, Jasmine, John A., Shanique, and Anthony. How do you guys balance your positions in the media with your identity as Black people, especially in times like these?
Well, we're human. We're human. I'm going to speak for myself and say I'm a human being first, before I'm a journalist. But that's also, I come from that old school of reporting where you try to be unbiased and you tell a story as it is with the facts and not taking a position. But at the same time, you can't be blind to what's happening in the world. So I think and I bring by nature, I bring my experiences and who I am to my job. I'm a Black man from Inglewood who was raised by a single mother. So that is going to shape my worldview. It's going to shape these stories that I want to go out and tell. And it's going to shape how I pursue those stories. It's going to shape who I talk to. I'm still going to get the facts and all of that and do a straight story. But I think for me in my career, it's led me down a path to pursue certain stories that I think the new organizations I work for would not have done them otherwise. And so I'm proud of that. It doesn't, I don't allow my blackness to overtake everything that I do, but I also don't diminish it in the work that I pursue, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't call it a balance. You know, I'm a Black producer, and, like Thomas said, it frames just about everything I do in life. So just how I'm, mindful of how being a woman frames my perspective, or like just how as an Eagles fan, if we're covering the Eagles, I'm not gonna bring too much bias to that. It's all part of who I am, and I'm responsible with what is appropriate. But there's no switch that I flip where I'm like, hold on, let me turn off my blackness so I can process this Colin Kaepernick story, in a fair way. It makes me a better producer, I think, because that's who I am. I'm just showing up as myself.
I would have to agree with Jasmine. I am a Black producer, even though I am a Black woman first. And side note, I'm a Saints fan. But I would have to agree. I don't know if any of you follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty vocal on Twitter. And I think that's where kind of the beauty of being behind the scenes lies. Unlike you, Steve, sometimes you can't say things that we can say because we're not on air. We're not.
Oh no, I will gas plenty of people.
Yeah,
if you follow me, I'm pretty ruthless.
I know.
Steve says whatever he wants to say.
But, there are people who are on air. And I was going to ask you that, how, as, people behind the scenes, how can we support our colleagues, our Black colleagues that are on the air that may not be able to say the things that they want to say? How can we support you? And I know I'm not the one asking questions, but I think, that's a conversation that needs to be had too, and vice versa.
Well, I'll answer that. I mean, when it comes to me gassing people on Twitter, that's okay. I'll fight my own fights because I'm a longtime writer, so I can hit them with the verbiage. But I think part of it is, and Shanika knows this. I mean, we were right there with each other in the newsroom for years, and Thomas too, and Anthony, when we do features and things like that, we've got a battle, man. I mean, Shanika worked with a couple producers on a couple shows she was at, where I know sometimes she was right there saying, is my job worth losing over me saying what I really want to say? And so she would, call me in her office, and we'd have conversations, and same vice versa. How can we believe we're not pushing this angle right here? They want to talk about the Dallas Cowboys over and over instead of pushing this story about Kaepernick. And sometimes you have to say, look, we're playing the long game, right? We're playing the fairways on the golf course instead of the putting greens. But to have someone like Shanika who ran a show, and if they had me on segments to moderate segments, and for her to say, let it rip, push our analysts to answer these questions honestly, because oftentimes they are not by our host on certain shows. They're very scripted.
Right.
But everyone knows when I'm on, be nimble, because we're going there. And that's part of the reason why I'm on certain shows. But to have the support like I have with Shanika, and look, I've got a certain gravitas. I've been at NFL Network for 12 years, but not a lot of people necessarily have that.
Right.
And so that's where people like me, we've got to make sure. Like MJ Acosta, who is just a wonderful, I think she's our first Latina at the network, where she's an Afro-Latina. She wears her blackness on her sleeve like nobody else. She will never fail as long as I am at this network, because she will do nothing wrong, and so I will go to the wall for her. And that's what we have to, as Thomas said, we've got to support our Black women, and we've got to have these people there. And, we have people, Shanika, same way. So the support I have, it is now my job, because I am front facing, to say, I'll take the freaking bullet if there's a bullet to be had, but you better know I got on a flak jacket.
Right.
And I can take it. So
I just say that because I saw NABJ's president, Dorothy Tucker, on CBS, and she basically said, one of the reporters asked her, is this the time where Black journalists can push that kind of, their career to the side and just, you need to know I'm a Black person first. So, and give their opinion about things and tell the truth about things rather than holding back like we used to. Like, sometimes when you're doing a political story, you can't insert your opinion, but now this is different. This is our livelihoods. This is our lives at stake. So that's what I mean about, putting our opinion out there.
And it's different. And I'll say this to everybody here. Exercise that right, because journalism has changed. When I came in, and, Sherrod, Blake, as we came in together, we're covering the NBA, and back in the day, it was state the facts and let everyone else make up their own mind. Journalism has changed. It is now putting things in context and being far more analytical. You cannot watch any type of reporting and not say, here's what happened. Now, this is where it fits, and explaining it. And that's kind of where I want to send this to Shanika, and I know it may be touchy. I don't know how you can do it, but you're in a situation. You work for the Saints. You work for the Pels. And your quarterback, Drew Brees, the other day was asked a question in an interview had nothing to do, it was by Forbes Business, about players potentially kneeling during the national anthem. And his answer had nothing to do with that. And he went straight to, I support everyone who stands for the national anthem with their hand over their heart. Something he said before, but it was so dismissive of everything that's been going on in the country right now. And you saw the blowback and how you cover that, because you have to be sensitive of your employer. You know that Drew Brees has done fantastic things for the Black community in the past. So, what about making the decisions on how to cover that and walking the line if there was a line to be walked?
Well, for us, it's sort of like, are we covering it? In what way can we cover it that you're not either throwing your quarterback under the bus or endorsing something that he said independently? Like, this is his viewpoint. This is not the viewpoint of the organization. It's not the viewpoint of Mrs. Benson. And so we didn't cover it, to be honest with you. We didn't cover his original statement. We didn't cover any of his apologies. This is Drew Brees as an individual speaking on his opinion and, dealing with the situation in the way that he now wants to deal with it, and the backlash that came with it. So yeah, we didn't do a story. We didn't, jump out after he said it and say anything about, oh, well, he didn't mean it, or we feel this about however he said. And then when he came out and apologized, you didn't see the Saints account putting anything out saying, yeah, we support his apology or anything. This has been Drew dealing with his teammates and dealing with Coach Payton and trying to work through, the issues that sprang up from a team standpoint. But in terms of how he will manage this situation, he's been managing this situation. It's been very separate from team and player. And I think that this has cropped up before, where there were some controversial comments that Drew made, and he made those comments and then, dealt with that backlash, and the organization wasn't a part of it.
Great. Well, I'm looking at the clock, looking at our timekeeper. We got to wrap this up. Everybody follow Jeanne, because she got the flamethrower from the back row on Twitter. Come on now.
The smoke is free. Like Drake said, free smoke.
There you go. There you go. But Sherrod, thank you so much for allowing us to do this. This is fantastic. What a great panel. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I think you offered a lot to the people who
Thanks
are watching, and just best of luck with everything.
Absolutely. And Steve, thank you for being the point guard and making sure everyone got enough touches out there. I appreciate that. This is the largest webinar that we've done as part of our, our webinar series. And, folks, if you want to see some of our other work that we've done as a sports task force, you can check out our YouTube channel, NABJ Sports Task Force. Just search that and you'll see some of the sessions we've done already on podcasting and storytelling and IG Live and things like that. We'll continue to do more webinar series in the month of July, and also all the way leading up to and past the NABJ convention in August. So definitely check that out. Again, I want to thank this esteemed panel. Lots of good food for thought out here, and I hope everyone is leaving with a full stomach, because I know I am. Great stuff. And again, check out our YouTube channel, subscribe, and just catch up on all the content that we've already produced and will continue to produce. So once again, thank you so much for all your time. And we'll be back with more content in the coming weeks. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good-
Take
Thanks,
care.
Sherrod. Bye.
Bye-bye.